Autism is a disorder characterized by impairments in communication, social interaction, and repetitive behaviors. Over the past 40 years, the measured prevalence of autism has multiplied, roughly tenfold. While progress has been made in understanding some of the factors associated with increased risk and rising prevalence, no one knows with certainty what causes autism or what caused autism prevalence to rise so precipitously. There is, however, a growing awareness among scholars that focusing solely on individual risk factors such as exposure toxicants, prenatal complications, or parental education is insufficient to explain why autism prevalence rates have increased so stunningly. Social and institutional processes likely play an important role. For example, changes in diagnostic criteria and an influx of resources dedicated to autism diagnosis may be critical to understanding why prevalence rates have risen. Increased awareness and social influence have been implicated in the rise of autism and a variety of comparable disorders, where social processes mimic the effects of contagion. Studies have examined the contribution of changes in diagnostic criteria and diagnostic substitution to rising autism prevalence rates, but the importance of institutional factors, resources for diagnosis, and greater awareness have not been systematically assessed. The sociological literature on health and inequality, however, provides substantial motivation for exploring how individual and community-level effects operate to shape the likelihood of an autism diagnosis. To understand the final reason why the news marketplace of ideas dominated by television is so different from the one that emerged in the world dominated by the printing press, it is important to distinguish the quality of vividness experienced by television viewers from the vividness experienced by readers. I believe that the vividness experienced in the reading of words is automatically modulated by the constant activation of the reasoning centers of the brain that are used in the process of co-creating the representation of reality the author has intended. By contrast, the visceral vividness portrayed on television has the capacity to trigger instinctual responses similar to those triggered by reality itself, and without being modulated by logic, reason, and reflective thought. The simulation of reality accomplished in the television medium is so astonishingly vivid and compelling compared with the representations of reality conveyed by printed words that it signifies much more than an incremental change in the way people consume information. Books also convey compelling and vivid representation of reality, of course. But the reader actively participates in the conjuring of the reality the book's author is attempting to depict. Moreover, the parts of the human brain that are central to the reasoning process are continually activated by the very act of reading printed words. Words are composed of abstract symbols, letters, that have no intrinsic meaning themselves until they are strung together into recognizable sequences. Television, by contrast, presents to its viewers a much more fully formed representation of reality, without requiring the creative collaboration that words have always demanded. As warmer winter temperatures become more common, one way for some animals to adjust is to shift their ranges northward. But a new study of 59 North American bird species indicates that doing so is not easy or quick. It took about 35 years for many birds to move far enough north for winter temperatures to match where they historically lived. For example, black vultures have spread northward in the last 35 years and now winter as far north as Massachusetts, where the minimum winter temperature is similar to what it was in Maryland in 1975. On the other hand, the endangered red-cockaded woodpecker did not alter its range at all despite the warming trend, possibly because it is very specific habitat. Requirements precluded a range shift. Both of these scenarios could represent problems for birds, Lasorte said. Species that do not track changes in climate may wind up at the limits of their physiological tolerance, or they may lose important habitat qualities, such as favored food types, as those species pass them by. But they also can't move their ranges too fast if the habitat conditions they depend on also tend to lag behind climate. Life expectancies have been rising by up to 3 months a year since 1840, and there is no sign of that flattening. Grattan and Scott draw on a 2009 study to show that if the trend continues, more than half the babies born in wealthier countries since 2000 may reach their 100th birthdays. With a few simple, devastating strokes, Grattan and Scott show that under the current system, it is almost certain you won't be able to save enough to fund several decades of decent retirement. For example, if your life expectancy is 100, you want a pension that is 50% of your final salary, and you save 10% of your earnings each year, they calculate that you won't be able to retire till your 80s. People with 100-year life expectancies must recognize they are in for the long haul, and make an early start arranging their lives accordingly. But how to go about this? Grattan and Scott advance the idea of a multi-stage life, with repeated changes of direction and attention. Material and intangible assets will need upkeep, renewal, or replacement. Skills will need updating, augmenting, or discarding, as will networks of friends and acquaintances. Earning will be interspersed with learning or self-reflection. As the authors warn, recreation will have to become recreation. How can we design great cities from scratch if we cannot agree on what makes them great? None of the cities where people most want to live, such as London, New York, Paris, and Hong Kong, comes near to being at the top of surveys asking which are best to live in. The top 3 in the most recent Economist Intelligence Unit's livability ranking, for example, were Melbourne, Vancouver, and Vienna. They are all perfectly pleasant, but great? The first question to tackle is the difference between livability and greatness. Perhaps we cannot aspire to make a great city, but if we attempt to make a livable one, can it in time become great? There are some fundamental elements that you need. The first is public space. Whether it is Vienna's Ringstrasse and Prater Park, or the beaches of Melbourne and Vancouver, these are places that allow the city to pause and the citizens to mingle and to breathe, regardless of class or wealth. Good cities also seem to be close to nature, and all 3 have easy access to varied, wonderful landscapes and topographies. A second crucial factor, says Ricky Burdett, a professor of urban studies at the London School of Economics, is a good transport system. Affordable public transport is the one thing which cuts across all successful cities, he says.